What's your name? Nice to meet you, Haley.
Yeah, put it over there.
Okay. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Ava Hartman. I'm the Executive Director of Canopy, and I am just here to get the event started. So I wanted to send some thank yous to the library for letting us have this space, to Master Gardeners, MC Iris, Sycamore Land Trust, Parks and Rec, especially our long-term partner, Jillian Fields, and then the City of Bloomington for sharing all the information that we've had about this event, and the many other things that they do for us. And I also want to give a big shout out to John, who is our community engagement specialist. And then obviously a huge thank you to Julie. So Julie Roberts is our Education and Outreach Committee Chair, and she kind of spearheads all of the education efforts that we do as an organization, one of those being Trees 101. And we're really glad that Julie's here, and we've done a few of these events online, but this is our first in-person one. So you guys are kind of our guinea pigs. But sit back, relax, and enjoy Julie talking about trees.
Thanks, Ava. Yeah. John, don't dim the lights quite yet. One of the big goals for Canopy is that we're building community. So before I get started with my rattle that I'm going to do, my long-winded ramble, I would love to go around the room, and if you don't want to say anything, you can just go like this and we won't bother you. But if you want to give us your name, tell us why you're here and what you'd like most to learn, then if we don't cover it now, we can connect with you later and one of us can get back to you and make sure that we get your questions answered. If you want to actually physically plant trees with us, we're going to have, 4 plantings coming up in March. And we love having people. Sometimes we have more people with shovels than we have holes to dig, but it's a fun experience. There's usually like coffee and donuts and food trucks and music. So we're really pulling out all the stops and trying to bring neighbors together and have some fun. So where shall we start? Kenny, you were the first one here. Let's start in the back.
Okay. Kenny, host blog.
Like I said, I used to teach in middle school, so I'm used to projecting. I also have a tendency to talk too fast. So if you need me to slow down, I'm happy to be interrupted. This is just a happy photograph of kids helping us plant trees. That's one of the most charming things about our plantings is that they tend to involve all ages. I think 4 I think is the youngest that we've had. And I think we've had some folks that were at least 84. So this is us at Bloomington South. Canopy Bloomington is our name. It's all run together as one big word. We've been planting with a number of the schools. How do we plant for free? Donations, grants, sponsorships from businesses. Sometimes they give us in-kind services, partnerships with other organizations, but mostly volunteer power. So we have people coming out and wanting to dig holes. Why do we plant? It's a 3-tiered mission: climate resilience, social justice, and building community. We want to get people back outside, off their screens, talking to their neighbors, having some fun, cooling things off so they can get out and enjoy things together. Climate resilience. There are only 3 ways that we really know how to cool a city right now: paint the roofs white, build water features, and plant trees. The way the trees work is that they are not just shade. It isn't like just putting an umbrella over your head. They actually act as gigantic chillers. The water that's absorbed by the roots travels up into the leaves, and then when it evaporates, it cools the air around it. They are gigantic coolers. I keep saying if somebody invented a machine that cost you maybe a couple $100 if you went on the expensive side to start with, increased in value every single year that you had it, required very little maintenance, could run for up to 100 years or more in the right conditions, and would cool everything without anybody having to do much except give it a bunch of water in a little room, it would be unbelievably expensive as a machine. Yeah, it'd be like $1 billion a machine. These folks do it for free. It can be up to 25 degrees cooler under a tree than on the surrounding blacktop. This is a chart that some families put together at a little outdoor education thing. The kids took a laser or infrared, whatever, those little, you point it and it tells you what temperature it is, and then came back and put stickers. So you can see the difference between under the tree and on the sidewalk. If you establish adequate tree cover on a city block, it can provide 10 degrees of cooling over the entire block. There aren't a lot of places in Bloomington that have what we would call adequate tree cooling power anymore. If you had to guess, you don't have to shout it out or anything, but just put a number in your mind, what percentage of the city's tree cover do you think we've lost in the last 25 years? Inside the city limits only, and not counting the last 6 years. What? Okay, thank you. What is a good indication that I need to be clearer? What percentage of Bloomington's trees do you think we've lost in the last 25 years?
60 plus.
70, 60 plus, higher, lower? I'm surprised anybody guessed that high, but yes, 56%. What I was trying to say that confused everybody is it doesn't include the last 6 years. So the derechos, the tornadic winds, all of the trees that have come down afterwards, everything Duke has cut because of power lines or trying to trim things up so we don't lose power for 8 straight days next time, that's not included in this number. That amounts to 8,000 acres of trees. Only in the city limits, we're not counting the county. To give you some estimate of how big that is, Switchyard Park is 65 acres. So we've lost 123 Switchyard Parks, solid, of trees in the last 25 years. I grew up here, I'm an artist, the trees have always been my inspiration. That's why I am so passionate about this work. There's a lot of reasons. Development, number one. When you need to build a house, you can't have trees sticking out. I mean, you could have trees sticking out in the middle of it, but that's some fancy architecture. The changing rainfall patterns, the extreme heat and temperature swings, invasive pests or native pests that have gotten out of control. This is one of the big ones, aging urban forest. We are supposed to have trees at all stages of life growing up all the time. We need babies and toddlers and teenagers and prime of life people and middle-aged people like myself and then old folks. We won't have almost all old folks right now because we planted so many of our trees back before air conditioning was all that prevalent. And as soon as we got air conditioning, oh, who needs shade? You got to mow around it. What a pain in the neck. So we don't plant trees as much as we could. Compaction. Trees need room to breathe. Their little fingers and toes have to have some space. And when you run over them constantly with whether it's cars or mowers or just foot traffic, let alone these 0 turn radius mowers, which weigh a ton compared to a normal push mower, it's really hard on the trees. It's like putting digging a little hole or a trough in the ground and putting your arm in it and then having a truck run over it. That's not going to make your arm feel very good. And then deer pressure. The things that would normally be growing up on their own, say in our parks and woods, are getting eaten down to the ground because the little sprouts have the most nutrition in them. Our second part of our mission is social justice, so tree equity, just what Julie was talking about here. If you've got neighborhoods like this, they're going to be vastly hotter than neighborhoods like this. And tree cover follows money, and money tends to follow whiteness. And so we are also working on some racial justice. So here are some of the data points. We use a bunch of them to make high priority maps. And if you're in a red zone, we're going to want to plant trees for free there with you. Income level and race are two of the big ones, and lack of trees and heat map. If you are into this kind of data, it's all over our website. We also have a youth tree tenders program. Jobs are available in the tree industry at every level, from no diploma to a PhD. And we are trying to get young people excited about that. It's even the kind of business where you can be your own boss and you can be outside. So ages 16 to 29, we're trying to start a school to green jobs pipeline.
Get them to branch out.
Yeah, nice, Andy. All right, and then community. When neighborhoods lack good tree cover, everybody turns up the air conditioning, stays indoors, and feels more isolated. We want to get them out having fun. And when they do things together, like the planting project or deciding we're all gonna water on Wednesdays, neighbors that water together grow together. And their trees survive better when the neighborhoods decide which day they're gonna do their maintenance or do their watering. They can keep an eye on each other's trees. They can say, I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks. Will you please water the trees as well as getting the mail? That kind of thing. So we're gonna jump into all of this information. 6 keys to young tree success. This is if you're planting nursery trees that are gonna be, you know, like an inch or 2 in caliber. It's a little different if you're gonna do seedlings. It's a lot different if you're gonna grow from seed. But we're gonna water sufficiently, cage sturdily, mulch mildly, choose wisely, plant correctly, and prune expertly. Water sufficiently. This is numero uno. In our experience of locally, trees die the most often because they haven't been watered enough. Rain that just came on its own used to be plenty. It isn't anymore. So one of these green gator bags, which some people find unsightly but are pretty handy, holds 15 gallons. If you plant a tree, throw one of those around it and fill it up once a week. Every week it doesn't rain an inch, then you should be okay. Every month except December, January, and February. We are now having weeks worth of 70 degrees in November sometimes. So we can't stop watering as early as we used to. Wow, that's a lot. Why so much water? Well, everything a tree needs except for water and some of the oxygen, except sunlight and some of the oxygen come up through the roots. So if you don't have enough water, the tree cannot do what it needs to do. And like we said, we don't have enough rain on its own. Here's what I thought trees look like underground. As of a few years ago, I thought this was how trees look underground. I was told there was as much under the ground as above the ground. That is not quite right. There's a lot going on underground, but it doesn't look like that. Most of the tree's root system is only 12 inches deep in the ground, and it goes out in a circle all the way around, like a big pizza with a hole in it, or if we're all old enough in here, like a LP record album. And so this means that it's not going deep in the ground like that, and it also means that it needs to be near the surface to get some of that oxygen. And that's another reason you want to keep your roots free of things like mulch. And so we've got our drip line, which is where the rain is going to start dripping on your head if you're standing there. The structural roots are the big strong ones right there. And then everything else tends to be those really fine little hair-like roots. Here's why we need to water so much when we put a tree in the ground from a nursery. This is going to be your most extreme case. If the tree's roots are 1.5 times wider at minimum than the tree is high, then when you chop off the roots to just this amount and then you ask it to grow, it's like cutting off your arms and legs and saying, please run a marathon for me now. This tree's been in the field growing naturally with nothing to contain it until you come along with this spade and chop it up. If you're getting burlap, ball and burlap trees, we call them B&B, and you really want to make sure that whoever's planting them for you is removing that cage, removing all of the plastic, removing the burlap, they'll tell you it can grow through that. It can, but it shouldn't, and it's already under unbelievable amount of stress. We plant container trees, and if you look real carefully, see these little blue plastic things? That's water. That tree is getting watered sometimes every hour with some sort of compost tea. So it's getting super duper nutrition and hydration. Now this is not as severe because the size of the bucket isn't nearly as small compared to the rest of the tree as that ball of burlap. But when you take it out of its pot, where it's in this lovely fluffy potting soil and it's getting this yummy, yummy drink, and then you stick it in our clay and ask it to please make a new root system, it's gonna go, ah! So that's why you have to water so much. Again, how many gallons?
15.
15 gallons, how often? Once a week, every week it doesn't. Rain 1 inch, okay? And all of these methods are fine. You can use the bag, you can just run the hose, you can get a bucket, as long as you are keeping track of that. And it doesn't hurt to have a piece of paper that you're writing it down on. Okay, now, would anybody be interested in planting trees that don't need to be watered to survive? You have to know a lot more about them, but you can join our partners at Parks and Recreation. And this guy over here, this is Ray. He's our Trees from Seed guru. The barefoot boy with shoes on stood sitting in the grass. And this is an 8-foot hypersimmon tree that's only had a summer and a half to grow. And it has watered it, okay? Now, not 15 gallons a week, probably more like a glug, glug, glug with a gallon jug when he's out there. But this is what can happen when the root system is never, ever amputated. That is a thing of beauty, because nature knows where those toes need to go. There's not going to be any kind of gaps and stuff and where it could dry out, because there's a hole where we didn't get the dirt put back in.
Julie, if I may explain that, it doesn't require water. It's
Right.
that large because it did get water, but in order to live, because it grew in place, it didn't require any water. If it had not been watered, it perhaps would be 3/4 of that height. So watering is done with these, not to keep them alive, but to allow them to grow faster.
Thank you, Ray. Yes, absolutely. I guess I did not make that clear. Yeah, it grows a lot faster if you do water it, but it'll survive a drought. Trees are engineered to survive the drought if they're in the ground correctly. Now, it takes a ton more information. Every kind of seed has a different way it needs to be planted or stratified or messed with over the winter or something. But if you want to get on the team, John and I have been doing this for a while, just go to the Parks and Recreation website, and under the weed wrangling section, look for oak seedling maintenance days. Well, they're doing this in Crestmont Park on the west side and down by the YMCA on the south side. And there are hundreds of baby trees in cages now that didn't cost anything except $7 or $5 for the little cage that's keeping them safe from the deer and the mower man. All right, number 2, Paige Sturdley. This is my backyard. I paid top dollar for these trees before I knew anything about doing it myself, and these little darlings would love to chew on them. My backyard is a deer daycare every single spring, and they're adorable, but they are dangerous. And these are Fort Knox cages. You don't have to go this crazy. I tend to go big or go home on stuff like this. So this cage probably cost, I don't know, $10 each for this, no, not even that much. It's probably a $30 or $40 cage. It doesn't have to be that big. Deer browse. Until I was recently educated, I thought that they grazed a little bit too, but no, they only want buds and things with lots of nutrition in them. And you can see by this guy standing on his back feet, they can get up pretty high. So, and he's also trying to start a family. This is itchy, blood-rich velvet on the antlers that are growing as much as an inch a week. It itches, and so they want to scratch it off. What fits in between those hooks more than anything, forks, is a baby tree. This is like the perfect thing to scratch with, so you want to keep that covered. They will also scrape on larger trees to mark their territory. It's a slightly different reason. I have to keep guards around some of my bigger trees because they just picked one. I under clearly intense deer pressure in my backyard. So here, this is tree guard. It's also good for keeping rodents off the bottom of your tree. And it's plastic and it's loose. It's not gonna bind the tree anywhere. This one's too short because it's been nabbed or rubbed on. Here's what they look like when they're healing. And this kind of wound can be either from a deer or as just about as often from somebody mowing too close to it when it was closer to the ground. Choose wisely. This is Miss Ava. We send her out to help you choose wisely if you're planting with us. If you're gonna invest in trees, I would sincerely suggest that you get an arborist or forester to come to your place and look at your site conditions. Because like there's 40 different types of oaks that grow in the United States, but some want to have wet feet, and some want to be high and dry, and some want to be on a sunny spot. So it's worth the money up front for a couple hours of somebody's time so that you're planting things that are going to succeed. Species matters. There's no way to guarantee that it won't come flying through your house. That's what tornadoes do. But there's an awful lot of things that we can do that will make it less likely to happen. 2 species of trees are most responsible for tree failures in Bloomington. We're very close to the city forester. He has told us this over and over again. Anybody want to guess what they are? Amy?
Calorie pear. Calorie pear.
Calorie pear. What's the other one?
Silver maple.
Silver maple. You guys know what you're doing. Okay, this is the notorious silver maple. Beautiful tree, lovely tree. I grew up surrounded by them. My grandmother said when you can see the silver side, it's going to rain. So, they're our #1 loss leader. When they grow in a big open place, they make these beautiful branching patterns. It's so nice and shady. In the forest, it'll grow more straight and tall, but even in the forest, it's dropping more branches than practically any other kind of tree. And it commonly lives 50 to 75 years. Silver maple, that's its lifespan. Bur oaks can live 200 to 300 years, in ideal conditions, up to 400. And if anybody wants to see an example of a bur oak, bottom of the stairs in Dunn Meadow at the bottom of the Union Building. These are pictures from the IU archives of this oak before anything was built. And I think this is a hoot because there was a tennis court where Dunn Meadow is right now. These guys are playing tennis. So yeah, and if you look closely, you can see the supports that Bluestone put in there. I was talking about even foot traffic can compact the ground. A bajillion students over 100 and how many years have made it very hard on that oak. So they did a bunch of air knifing to try to fluff up the ground and get it some more oxygen. Please stop planting maples. We love them. And there's a lot of different kinds. There's sugar maple and red maple and all that kind of stuff. But they're over 30% of our tree stock, which is dangerous. If there's a thing that targets maples that comes through here, we're in bad shape. I think that our ash trees were less than 10%, and you know what that did. There's maple decline all across the country because they can't handle the uneven rainfalls. And there are places where they can't even get maple syrup certain times. There's somebody in Brown County that said, yeah, we can't get any maple syrup the last 2 years. I'm gonna have a few 90s song references in here. So oaks, oaks, baby. 40 different kinds in North America. They aren't all gonna be thriving in Indiana, but there's a bunch of them. They're strong, drought resistant, long-lived, and best in the changing conditions. We're gonna give you 2 tree lists. This is Canopy's planting list. It's not real big because we try to keep it simple. On the back is the city's list. Again, you're gonna wanna check with somebody who can come to your property before you make your decisions. But there's some ideas. The Bradford pear. For anybody who doesn't know, boo, poor Bradford pear. It came to help us. So they developed this tree that grew really fast and was really pretty. It was a hybrid from something that grows in Asia, but it was the achy breaky tree because it took about 15 years, started falling apart. So they bred it again, and they got a little too much of its wild cousin in there, and now it's gone bananas. And just like an aspen, once it escapes, it can grow a monoclonal globe. So grow some of its roots, it can send up all these shoots, so one tree can turn into a forest. And you'll see them in the spring, they turn white before anything else is even woken up. You can replace your calorie pear with all these pretty natives. And this is trees that I got up, not the pictures, but the types of trees. Last year, MC Iris, we love MC Iris, was giving you a tree if you would replace your calorie pear. So we've got dogwood, redbud, black gum, a couple other ones that I don't have off the top of my head. So if you're interested in that program, I don't think it's always running, but you can go to MC Iris if they have funding for it. They'll probably do that again this year because that's a big part of the mission. Evergreens that are struggling and threatened. All of the spruces and white pine. Spruces, it's too hot. They're beautiful trees, beautiful, beautiful trees. Some of my favorites in the world because you can go under these droopy branches and it's like your own little kingdom. But it's too hot, it's too humid, and they don't like having wet roots. White pine decline is happening all across the country as well. They don't like our heavy clay soil or the heat. But there are other things that could be causing this too. And sometimes if there's a line of them, because people tend to plant them in a line, One of them might have bark beetles or some other thing going on, and if you remove that one, the rest of them may be fine. It might even be something that you can treat. But I'm also going to point out right now, if you have any kind of a tree question, if you put your terms into Google and then add Purdue, you're probably going to get better information than like let me AI tell you. So Purdue is a terrific resource. I'm not going to throw any shade on Purdue. They're tree people through and through. This is my favorite to replace anything that's failing in the evergreens. It gets a bad rap. People call it the Charlie Brown tree. But this is a pioneer species. You'll see it along the highway where there's been disturbed soil. They're tough as nails. They make incredible berries for our bird people. And they provide a lot of cover in the wintertime for wildlife. And it has beautiful bark. And when it gets big, there's a bunch of them in my neighborhood. They can be really pretty. If you limb up down here so it's not all stuck on the ground and you can walk underneath it, it's a lovely tree. Plant correctly. If you really want to know how to do this, you're going to have to come plant with us because that part is too long to present. You're all probably getting itchy already. But basically, we're going to talk about what we're looking to do when we plant. We want whatever we put in the ground to have a natural root flare at the right height. This beautiful thing that we all learned to draw in about 4th grade when it stopped being a lollipop and it started looking like this. That is important. We don't want to bury that. And according to a Clemson study from the early 2000s, 93% of professionally planted trees, the people who make a living doing this, are too deep. Nobody's doing it on purpose. There's just a lot of conditions that are set up to make this easy to mess up. Number one, when they grow in seedlings in the greenhouse and then they plunk them into a bigger pot, a bigger pot, a bigger pot, each of those places is an opportunity to get the roots down too low. And then sometimes the watering system can rush a bunch of dirt over the roots. So this tree's been buried. It's had surgery done where they pulled away the dirt, cut off the extra roots, and exposed the root flare. Because if it's buried, it's going to be rotting. It's going to be choking, oxygen can't get to it, and then it's going to be in danger of circling itself, and we'll show another picture of that. So when we plant trees, we have really good ones, but we still wind up with this situation where everything at that top line is below the soil, but right here is where the root flare is. So you have to go and cut off these opportunistic stress roots. Don't be confused and put it in the ground where that top line is, or you will have buried your root flare anyway. So if you do that, you can see how this is just came straight out of the pot and everybody left the roots going around. That's probably how the size the container was. As the tree grows, it's going to choke itself. It's going to pinch off, like if you put a rubber band around your wrist and left it there for a couple of years. So when we get them out of the bags, we get rid of circling roots and J roots. Anything that's going back up gets cut. All of the roots need to go down and out. We do have guides, so if you want a paper guide with instructions on it, Ava has a bunch of those on the table. You can also go to our website. Mulch mildly. El lo que no es bueno, is what one of my landscaping buddies told me. For some reason, this has become a la mode. This is the fashion. Somebody told me her brother was a landscaper up in Indy, and the customers would say, I want the mountain. Why don't I have the mountain? Everybody else has the mountain. Well, the mountain is killing your trees. So it's one of those things. I think it happens because when you dump a wheelbarrow against the truck, that's just kind of how the dirt lands, or the mulch lands. And an awful lot of people are not just hired for that rush season in the spring, and they don't get trained properly. So the golden rule of mulch is 3, 3, 3. 3 inches thick, 3 feet across, 3 inches at least away from your root flare. Some people call it a donut, but people really like to pile up mulch and don't know what it is. Sometimes it winds up looking like a truck tire around your tree. So I like to think of it as a pizza that maybe has a thick crust. But that is your rule for mulching. And you might have seen our signs in the city parks about mulching a few years ago. Okay, prune expertly makes the tree stronger, safer, and healthier. It won't have as many branches crisscrossing where they could start to rot. We call it occlusion. It's gonna make it want to drop branches. It won't catch the wind. If it's a big, thick sail, when the wind hits it, it's gonna be more likely to push it over. If it can breathe and the wind can pass through it, it's safer. But every species has different seasons, conditions, and needs, and you can really damage a tree if you prune it yourself if you don't know what you're doing. If you do it right when it's young, you may never have to do it again. And if you do it when it's young, you don't have to pay people to get on ladders or climb up ropes to get to it. Recommend you give it a couple of years to establish before you go chopping on it. But again, it's one of those things you want to pay to have it done. If you want to find an expert, it's probably best to look for a local company first, and then before you call them, check them. See if they've got an arborist on staff. Because if you just go to this website, you're also going to get everybody who is working for Duke or Vectron or all kinds of different private places that you can't hire them from, and it could just be frustrating. But this will tell you whether or not people are certified. You can also find folks who are certified to assess risk. So if you think you've got a problem tree and you just call someone who has a truck and a chainsaw, they're probably going to want to cut it down because they honestly believe that's the best solution, and they also have to pay for the truck and the chainsaw. So if you hire an arborist who's risk certified, they can't guarantee you anything either, but they can give you a lot more information about the health of the tree, the likelihood that it's going to be a problem, and what you can do to make things safer.
Question.
Yes?
How do you know, is that a different number? Is that a different initials behind their name that's their risk certified?
Oh.
How do you find out?
It'll say that. There's like columns that tells you each thing they're certified for, and it should say risk assessment. There aren't a whole lot of them in Bloomington right now, but there are a few. One of our favorite guys just left town. Carrie left. Okay, you can become an expert or at least a slightly more knowledgeable amateur. DNR tree stewards, I've been through that, Ava's been through that, Kenny here has been through that. It's a really fun program. You get to meet a lot of like-minded people. It's over a couple of days on the weekend. Youth tree tenders, if you or someone you love is between 16 and 29 years old, they can get signed up for that. And we hope to have some pruning workshops in the future. So that's the end of the spew from me. If you guys have any questions, if you want to donate to us or sign up for the newsletter, I just like her attitude. She's great. This is a boss baby, and she's going to get the job done. I wanted to put that Taylor Swift song, Are You Ready For It? But I couldn't figure out the audio. So anyhow, this has been really fun. I'm so excited to have all of you here. That's it.
Over there, off of 46, 2 miles outside county.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know. So it's not far. I'll see you in a week and a half. In the Ambassador Naturalist program over there. They're at Abraham Lunch.
I can write it down.
No, that's.
Am I supposed to speak to that?
It's April.
Am I supposed to speak to that? I don't know. It might be in April, isn't it?
I think it's in April. Yeah, it is April. I don't know why. Well, look like she's getting ready to start. I'll talk to her.